So we've just turned 1 o'clock, so welcome to LoveWorkLife Training Academy. Today's recruitment training will all be about control and negotiation and how it will be key in the new world of work. We've got probably about half the people who've signed in now signing on. There's the figures are suddenly leaping up very, very quickly. We've got lots of people today on the webinar, which is really good to see. So I just want to give a quick shout out to quite a lot of the people that are here. We've got STEM recruitment, we've got Legal B, we've got Bonbon, we've got Obscure, we've got Keen, we've got Cloudbase, FJ Wilson, Charlton Morris, TTS 24/7, GS Recruitment, Star Recruits, Requires Consulting, Cooper Lomax, Premier Group, Pivotal Recruit, Indigo Stone, Judge Recruitment, CKG Search, Impact Recruitment, Exact Sourcing, Clara Rose, Advantage, TN Recruitment, Advantus Legal, West Ray, Experis, Amicus, Prosper Recruitment, Hull Recruitment, Premier IT, Taste Hospitality, Cherry Professional, Fight, and a few more as well. So there's lots of people sort of coming in very, very quickly. We're sort of building up our numbers. So let me sort of kick off really and tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be doing today. As I said last week, I think what we're going to talk about today is going to be very key as we start to take work on from clients in the new marketplace. The control and negotiation of the whole process becomes really important. But what becomes more important is the time that you expend with the client and with your candidates, especially if you're not in control. Because when we start to look at control, we're now going to sort of go into a period where the jobs you work are absolutely critical. So if you're working roles that you're not really controlling and the client's controlling you, then you're going to find that you are on the back foot constantly, and you're probably working the wrong roles that will actually lead to results at the end of the day. So we've got to start to make really important decisions about what we want to be doing constantly. So in this training course, we're going to look at the following things. We're going to look at the objectives of why gain and preserve control, understanding the importance of being in control, when you should gain control, questions to maintain control, the warning signs that your return on investment is shrinking, regaining control when it's lost, negotiating and remaining in control, the difference between selling and negotiation, preparation, and the features and advantages of benefits. So it's going to be quite a lot of things to sort of cover. So it's going to be quite a fast hour. If you want to ask questions, feel free to ask questions. But bear in mind, there is only me managing this webinar today. So I will keep looking between my slides and what's going on, and also the question panel and what's going on from there. So if you want to ask a question, either fire it into the question box, into the chat room, and feel free to move from there. Okay, so let's really kick off. So, and my screen has frozen. That's really good. There we go. Okay. So why gain control and preserve control all the way through the recruitment process is a must. You know, what does it actually mean to take control and why it's important? Certainly when I sort of talk to new recruits and to people with experience who are probably failing at what they're doing, it's their lack of control and their understanding why they need to take control that is lacking. And what they miss is the fact that they need to create an equal partnership where both parties understand the expectation of what's required for a positive outcome. And both parties need to understand and be committed to the actual recruitment process. Too often we engage with clients that aren't committed to our recruitment process. And therefore, you're going to find that if the client is in control, there's a less chance of you actually getting to the end game, which is actually making a placement with the client. So you need to control the process and own it. You need to make sure the recruitment process is actually fit for purpose, because that actually prevents hiccups and anything going wrong during the recruitment process. We also need to commitment from both sides to prevent the client from going rogue on you, i.e. not turning calls, cancelling interviews, giving no feedback, and missing deadlines. So it's important that we really start to take control and control the process all the way through to make sure that we are talking and taking control of the situation and managing the relationship all the way through. So why gain control and why keep preserving control? And my screen is just locked. I apologize for that. Let me see if I can get that back. I don't know what happened there, guys. My PowerPoint has just completely died on me. Let me give me 2 seconds to reboot my PowerPoint. Sorry about that, chaps. I hope you can all see that now. I hope that's back. Can you just confirm that you can see that? Because my PowerPoint just suddenly died on me very quickly. Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Neil. We're back. Good. Okay. So let's hope that nothing like that carries on as we get back into the process. Let me just, there, right. Okay. So we're back to where we were. Okay. Good. Okay. So we need to control not just the process, it's more than that. Okay. You can lose face massively if you lose control. And I can see what's going to happen now. Just stop the slide for 2 seconds, because what's going to happen is it's going to end up running on a timer, because for some reason it's all logged off. So that's just going to time me all the way through this process. Just try to stop the timers. We've got to love technology, eh, guys? Right, sorry about the technical hiccup there, guys. So we've got to control, because otherwise you can just lose face with the client if you miss a deadline or simply you cannot supply what you've promised. You need to demonstrate to the client that you're a professional recruiter and you can't afford to lose credibility. Especially now in the marketplace, as the marketplace is, credibility is going to be really important to you. So you've got to create that equal partnership where both parties understand the expectations required and the positive outcome that come from that. Both parties need to understand and need to be committed to the actual recruitment process. Not only that, we need to think of the fee that we're actually going to be charging for the position. That is actually massively under the spotlight. And if we're looking at what we're doing now and the new things that we can add to the recruitment process, if we start to lose control of the recruitment process and that fee becomes massively under the spotlight, what we seem to feel is clients don't feel the value, and we are probably under-delivering on the promises that we've made to the client, which we can't really afford to do. So we've got to take control of our own process. We need to make sure the recruitment process is fit for purpose and there is no hiccups. Lack of control demonstrates that you don't understand your own recruitment process, and therefore the client will believe that you're unable to actually deliver back to that client. So commitment from both sides prevents this and prevents the client going rogue. So we've got to make sure that we constantly work at gaining control and preserving that control all the way through the recruitment process, because we want to maintain credibility and prevent any lack of continuity where the client can challenge our costs and our recruitment process. So how do we recognize when control is lost? How do we recognize that control is starting to slip away and we're heading for a bit of a crash landing? We've got to think. We have got to think very closely and look at what the client actually does and says all the way through the recruitment process. If we start to hear these things from the client, then it is a sure sign that we're starting to lose control. So we need to look out for the things that come up straight away. So we've got to look out when the client stops returning our calls or stop answering emails. too often we are thinking, well, they're going to answer that call, they're busy, they're doing this. If you've set your process up properly and your client is truly engaged with you and you're a partner with your client, they will answer your emails and they will answer your calls. If you start to think about the feedback that you get from a client, if you're not getting good quality feedback from your client on your candidates, then you don't know whether you're looking or finding the right candidate in the first place. So you've got to make sure that you are in control of that feedback process all the way through. When your client changes the job specification or starts rejecting candidates based on skills that they weren't asked for initially, again, it shows that the initial phase of taking that job specification wasn't locked down enough. You lacked control at that stage and you hadn't probed enough to really understand what the client wants, because now they're trying to start to change things. We're also asking the client here about their commitment for the role that they're recruiting for. Do they truly understand what they're recruiting for? Because if they don't, then that's when they start to change the job spec, because they start to see candidates that maybe can offer them different types of things, which means they can start to look for different types of things in their business, which means they change their job spec, which means not only are you now doing the job once, but you're now doing the job twice. So really what you're thinking is, if you can do the job right first time, you'll get paid that fee. But if you have to keep repeating the job and keep changing the job, then you're actually starting a new job process every time. And that's a loss of a fee and a cost of your time and the engagement that has been lost, which you'll never get back. So we've got to make sure that we start to look at renegotiating or start making unrealistic demands with clients. As they start to come through, clients will start to demand different things and they'll start renegotiating, especially if they don't see value in your service. They'll renegotiate quite hard on your product. Also, if you haven't controlled the process to the point where you have signed terms and conditions with your client, what you're going to find is that once the client has the candidates that they want, they will come back and they'll negotiate hard on your fee, because that's now an opportunity for them to really take advantage. So really, control is still about doing the basics of recruitment and putting the basics right. You've got to understand that the client threatens to pull a vacancy or puts it out with another agency when they feel that you lack the experience, or you lack the product, or they lack the quality and the value that you promised them to deliver an end product to the client. So if your client is starting to pull the vacancy away from you, you start to see the vacancy advertised out with other recruiters, it says that your process isn't of value and your process isn't worthy for them to engage with you more, and therefore again we're lacking control. So if the client starts to reject, or so the candidate rejects an offer for reasons unknown to you that the client has tabled last minute, then again, it shows that lack of control through the whole process. And when I say reject offers, you get offers rejected for things that the client maybe talked to about the candidate in the interview that you hadn't spoken to the candidate about, that the candidate might not like. You may get offers rejected purely because the client has gone in, you've submitted a candidate at a rate, and you've accepted their salary, and all of a sudden the client doesn't feel the value from that candidate and therefore comes in at a lower salary and rejects the candidate because of that, or the candidate rejects the client because of that. So we've got to start to think all these things now that start to link together become a really problematic when we start to gain control. So we've got to start to think that we must gain control with the client all the way through. And the client, we must set expectations and never overpromise and underdeliver, because that leads to real problems. So when we start to talk about gaining control, that first call is the most important call, because that's where we start to gain control. That's where we start to put the actual land down and say, this is what we need to be doing. This is where we got. It's really difficult. It's almost really impossible to gain control once the process has really started, if we've allowed the client to control in the first place. So the quality of your service delivery from the start to the end of the process is really important. Control is reconfirmed every time you deliver quality within the agreed timescales and beyond the expectations initially set out. So if you overpromise and underdeliver, your quality is always up for question. Your fees and your rates will always be up for question. So we've got to make sure that when we go on that first call, we take charge. we drive the expectations of the client, and we fix the expectations early in the process to make sure the client understands what we're going to deliver, when we're going to deliver, and the client also understands what's expected of them all the way through the process. So we're going to start looking at gaining control from the start. Your client answers the phone. What can you do from that first sentence to earn respect and gain control? And it's really interesting when I start to talk about consultants about that very first conversation, that initial call. And it's a difference now that we're going to find is absolutely running through the marketplace. The difference between being a recruiter, a consultant, and a professional will now become very apparent to the client, because the market has all moved in one big swing towards a digital process and towards a digital market. And therefore the client will be able to understand who can provide and who can't provide a quality service, a different service. So you have to be able to have confidence in yourself and confidence in your process to be able to sell that to the client. And the client can understand that, and the client can feel that on that very first call if you're not confident in your process. So if we're putting lots of new processes in now, we've got to ensure that we understand how those processes work. So when we go and speak to the client, we are confident in the actual process that we run. Like, we've got problems here on technology at the moment. Microsoft is crashing its its PowerPoint presentation. But we're confident that the PowerPoint presentation will last now all the way through, because we've reset it, rebooted it, and re-gone on. But we've got to understand that if we're doing that with the recruitment process with a client, it's a far bigger thing that we've got to look at, because the recruitment process is not just me talking to you about this. When we go to the recruitment process, he may have other agencies talking to him about their process and what they're doing. And if their process is massively above yours, then all of a sudden they start to take the lead. They have an opportunity to take that client away from you, and therefore you start to lose the client. So you've got to ensure you gain commitment throughout the process. You've got to set tests to measure commitment. So when I say set tests to measure commitment, the tests that we should be setting are getting email confirmation, getting interview dates confirmed and times agreed during the recruitment process when we're taking the job specification, not after we've submitted CVs. We've got to set the right precedents. Whatever precedents you set at the beginning of the relationship will become the expectations and the assumption of the norm when we go through that. So if we're setting poor expectations from day one, then the client is going to believe he's going to get a poor result at the end of it. So we've got to become more professional. We've got to become more consultative. We've got to advise our clients of the benefits of them using our process, or a hybrid of your process and their process, to ensure that we get to the end. So again, when we're doing that, that over delivery is really, really something we can't afford to promise. So if anything, we need to promise to under deliver, so we can outperform our promises all the way through. But we need to be honest and upfront with the client. If you can't deliver something, you need to tell the client you can't deliver something. You need to be able to ask the awkward questions and be consultative. So you need to anticipate what might go wrong. And if it goes wrong, you need to be able to ask the questions early to ensure you maintain control. And keeping in regular contact with the client will always ensure that you are constantly in control with your client. So establishing control from the outset is really important. And establishing control from the outset means that we've got to start to do the things as we mean to go on. So you've got to start to set the right precedents early. And starting to set the precedents is to know your marketplace, know the skills that the client requires, and know your competitors. You've got to demonstrate your professional standing in the community. So if you've been doing lots of marketing behind the recruitment process, through LinkedIn, through job boards, through Twitter, etc., the client's now expecting a certain professional standard from you. So you've got to now live up to that standard, especially if your marketing is really high. So again, if we're over-promising and under-delivering, it leads to real problems. So as I said, if we can't deliver, we need to be honest. But what we need to start to do is look for alternatives. If we can't deliver the type of candidate that they want at the moment because that type of candidate is not available in the marketplace, how can we manipulate this job specification, or how can we talk to the client about alternatives? If you know that candidate doesn't exist, tell the candidate, the client, rather going out and trying to find the candidate and driving that. So you need to have confidence in your ability and know your product and your marketplace. Because if you know your product and your marketplace, and you know you can find the candidates, then certainly you can work that with the client. And that means you can gain more control. But if you know you can't find the candidates, then you need to tell the client that from the get-go. Because what that means, you've got an opportunity to maybe sell a different style of recruitment to the client. You could sell a retained piece of recruitment, but you could also inform the client why it might take so long, and the duration of the recruitment might increase, because you have to then go properly into the market and hunt for those candidates rather than find them on the job boards. So you need to make sure that you know how your market works and the products that you're selling to your client. So you need to be confident in the solutions that you're selling and get commitment early and continue getting commitment all the way through the process. So that closing process is really important. Trial closing with your client constantly all the way through there drives up the commitment levels. So if you're not trial closing with your client all the way through on every single call you find with the client, then you're going to find that your commitment levels drop. We need to send confirmation to your client of the things that we have both committed to. It's quite interesting when I speak to recruiters about this. What generally happens is if you walk into a meeting with your boss and you talk about what you're going to deliver over the next month, your boss will write to you and confirm what their expectations are of what you're going to deliver next month. You then go back and confirm those expectations and then go away and deliver those expectations. We should be doing exactly the same thing with the client. We should be confirming the expectations that we've set in writing. And if we confirm them in writing, then it means we've got a marker to move from. We know where the line in the sand is. We know what the expectations are. Therefore, we can start to deliver this to them. And if we're setting expectations on the client and the client's not holding up their side of the bargain, then that's an opportunity for us to work more with the client and pull the recruitment process more in line with ourselves. So we have to be consultative. If you don't ask, you don't get control. And if you lose control, it's usually because you haven't asked, or your lack of knowledge and your lack of understanding all the way through the process. So we've got to keep working on that, and you've got to be absolutely confident in your ability to achieve the goals that you want to, that you've set from the outset. So at the end of all that, what we've got to do is make sure we ask the questions that need to be asked, but we've also got to make ourselves available to the client 24/7 to generate or demonstrate commitment, but also to ensure that we can deliver. What COVID-19 has brought in, it's brought in almost zero working hours, because clients are getting up at strange times, as I'm sure we're all getting up at strange times. We're all working odd hours, so that means we've got to be available to our clients and our candidates when those odd hours are there. So that means almost we have to be 24/7 available to our client. But if we set those expectations down on when we want to be gathering feedback, the interview dates, etc., then already we've got lots of the parts of the process set down in writing with our client, and we've all committed to do that. What those commitments do, it raises the game. If we've committed to deliver something by a certain date, that means we have to hit that date. That means if we hit that date, we're expecting the client to also hit their dates as well. So it puts up the ante, it puts up the professionalism of actually hitting a target that we've agreed and gone to. So have you the basic job spec? You need to ask the questions to gain control. The basic job spec is where everything really starts to come together. We could have started to gain control during our BD calls and start to set expectations during our BD calls. But when we have the client there and he's giving us a job spec, we can start to understand the priorities that we have and the priorities that the client has. And we can start to understand whether there is money to be made from this process or not. So you have the client where you want them, but before you start to engage, you've got to start to ask the questions that you should be asking when qualifying the vacancy to prevent the loss of control. And what I generally find when I go into candidate consultants and start drilling back to where control is lost, it usually is on the job specification. So we've got to start to think about the questions that we start to ask our candidates, our clients, to make sure that we gain control. And there is a big difference between those that are good at recruitment, those are brilliant at recruitment, and those that excel at recruitment. If you're a smart recruitment agency, you will have a job specification sheet. And if you're a smart manager, what the manager will be doing is every time you take that job specification, they'll look at that job specification sheet. And if they see white space on that job specification sheet, then you've not asked all the questions. If the job specification sheet isn't getting you to the end of the process, then the job specification sheet needs to be developed and more questions added to that job specification sheet, because we need to gain control and more control all the way through this process to ensure that we get the end results. So the importance of asking questions early is exactly where it starts. So you need to look at the key skill sets and what your trade for, or what they would trade for experience. Because quite often the key skill sets aren't all available. What clients tend to look for is they look for the perfect candidate. And more often than not, the perfect candidate isn't available. So what else can you trade for? Skills, experience. Can you trade the market knowledge, etc.? What can you trade? How quickly does the client actually need the person? Now, in this marketplace, depending on how they're coming out of COVID-19, would it dictate when they can take people on? If social distancing is here for quite some time, as I expect it to be, how they take that person on is going to be really important. So again, we've got to start asking the client about all those things, about when they're going to take the person on and how they're going to take the person on. Because what we need to be asking is, what happens if they cannot get the right person in the timescales required? And if they can't get the person in the right timescales required, what's going to happen to their projects? What's going to happen to their business? Is that causing a knock-on effect which might cause damage to the client's reputation or damage to the manager's reputation within the business? We always talk about the interview process, and we always talk about putting an interview process in. But now's the time. We have video technology, and because of social distancing, we will be using videos for a long time to interview people, and that will become the norm. So now we should be doing the right thing when taking the job specification, and that is booking interview dates into the diary now, not just the first interview date, but second interview dates and third interview dates in the diary now of your client as you take the job specification. If I look at my diary is changing every half an hour. Someone's booking something in, someone's taking something out, someone's moving something around. Our clients are going to be absolutely the same, because control is a lot harder when we're working with disparate organizations which have people working from home, clients working from home, etc., etc. So their diaries are going to change. So we need to book things in stone in their diary weeks in advance to ensure that when our candidate has been viewed and been granted an interview, the client has the interview time now, not I'm going to say take an interview today, I'm going to offer the interview today, but the client's not available for another 3 weeks, because by that time your candidate will potentially have gone and moved away. So we've got to really make sure that we work really hard on booking down our interview process. We need to make sure that we arrange calls for 2 days from taking the initial job specification. If we can arrange a call for 2 days' time, it gives you an opportunity to really review the marketplace. You've got 48 hours to look at what's happening in the marketplace. And then you can go back to the client and be very consultative about what is your expectations are. And you can then set further expectations or readdress the expectations if you can find the candidates, if you can't find the client, what's going on. So you can make sure that if you book that call in for 2 days' time and you're going back and you're feeding back on what the market is like now, it gives the client a far better understanding. It gives the client peace of mind. So you've got to make sure that we are more, I suppose, in contact with the client than ever before to make sure we get to the end of the process. If we can't find suitable candidates, we need to go back to the client. If after that 48 hours we can't find a suitable candidate, we need to go back and tell the client what type of candidates we can find. We can then start to look at the job specification and look at what we can trade, what we can move, how it does. We need to make sure that when we're speaking to the client that this job hasn't been out before. And if it has been out before, how many CVs have they received? How many CVs have they seen? What interviews they've done? But what happened? Why didn't they take people on? Why was it that these people didn't get the job? What was it about the candidates that was wrong in the first place? If we can find those type of things, then we can find out why they haven't filled the position in the first place. We also need to find at the end of every conversation with the client, is there anything that you've told me that will help me find the most suitable candidate for you? If we start asking that question regularly through the recruitment process, because every time the client changes slightly something, it changes the whole process. So we need to make sure that we know absolutely everything. So finishing a call with that type of question means the client has to think back over everything that we've talked about. If we recap everything that we've talked about, it gives the client the opportunity to think what we've done. So that means we're negotiating very, very quickly, and we're taking control of what the process is. And the client now is giving everything that we need. By knowing everything, it means we can find the candidate by design and not by luck, which means we can expedite our process and come back to the client far quicker than we have before. But what happens? The client's not responding and you've lost control. What are the warning signs? What are the danger signs to that? Things are not going to plan and the client's not committing to us. We need to take control back. So once we've started that recruitment process, if they're not going right, we need to come back, because to me that is a warning sign that our return on investment is starting to shrink. And once our return on investment starts to shrink, then we're starting to lose control. If we're losing control, working a job then that is never ever going to come to fruition and never going to make us money. So there's a question of why we would work that job and should we walk away. So again, we're back to the usual things of what should we do when we're in that? How do we recognize that? So again, the client will stop returning calls and emails. The client will reject perfectly good candidates for no reason. Now, if you have the perfect job spec now with a client and the client's now rejecting really strong candidates, there has to be a reason for that. You have to dig in to find that reason. If they change the job spec again, it's certain telling you that the client isn't either ready to recruit or doesn't really know what they're recruiting. And again, if we see lots of agencies advertising that, we've got to go back to the client and understand why they're not using us on an exclusive basis, why they've gone out to other agencies. If you've got 3 agencies on the preferred supplier, if you're seeing agencies that aren't on that preferred supplier, why are they going out to those agencies? What is it they expect for that? And we've got to start to sell to the client and get the client to understand that pitching agency against agency is really folly. It is no good. And I've sat in lots of client meetings where I've said to clients quite pointedly, do you understand what happens when you put 3, 4, 5, 6 agencies against each other on a contingency-based recruitment? And the client will look at me and says, yeah, you all compete to find the best candidates in the quickest way. And I'm saying, no, we don't. Because if a client comes to me, another client comes to me and gives me an exclusive job, I'm going to stop working your job. If a client comes to me and gives me a retrained job, I will never be working your job, because I'm now getting paid for a recruitment and I know I'm going to earn some money from that role. So I will only work your role if I have a candidate that I can fill in that role. If I get better roles to work, I will drop your role instantly, as will every other agency. And clients are not quite bright enough to understand that. And we need to work with the clients more to make them understand what happens, what pressure it puts on a recruiter and what pressure it puts on the marketplace by working continuous recruitment in that way. But also, what pressure is it putting on them, the client, in working in that way? The pressure it puts on them is they're not getting the right people through the door. So they're spending more time recruiting than doing their job, so which puts pressure on them. They haven't got the right person in to help them do their job, putting more pressure on them. So we've got to start thinking about the mental capabilities, the mental health, and the stress that it puts on people by following that old continuous recruitment process. We've got to really move away from that and start to really work with the clients properly about taking control, making sure that we are always in control, because the prevention is better than the cure, because prevention will stop the stress, prevention will stop loss of earnings on both sides, and prevention will make sure you get to the end of the recruitment process, where at the moment, I think, I was very quickly looking at the stats from last year. The stats last year was something like 2.5 out of every 10 placements taken, or every requirement taken on was placed. The national average is 2, and I think last year they were saying it'd gone up a little bit to 2.5, which says we're working 80% of our time on roles that we never fill. And at this moment in time, when we come out of COVID-19, if you're spending 80% of your time on things that never make you money, that's an awful long time waited. So we've got to start to regain control, and we've got to regain control really quickly. So regaining control when it's lost is, I think, I always look at this in a very strange way. Okay, regaining control when it's not impossible. If the warning signs are there, to me, what I find that warning sign is from the client, it's a cry for help. It's a cry for help from the client that they don't understand either what they're doing or they don't understand what you're doing. And that's all down to communication. If we've communicated that poorly, then the client will maybe lose control and lose faith in ourselves. And therefore, we've got to work really hard in that. So we've got to think, as soon as your client misses a deadline, we need to address that. If we've set a deadline, we've got to absolutely make sure that the client hits the deadline, but we've also got to make sure that we hit the deadline. You've got to speak with your manager. Okay, if you're not speaking with your manager about the recruitment process, about what's going on with your client, you might not realize that you're actually flogging a dead horse. And it's very interesting sometimes when you take yourself out of the process and look at the process and say, would you carry on working with that client or working that role as it is? Or are you flogging a dead horse? So sometimes you have to ask other people about the process and step out. We've got to make sure that you have a plan of what you want from the call or what you want from the recruitment process, because you want to carry on or walk away. And I think at this moment in time, a lot of agencies and a lot of recruitment agencies, once we start picking roles up again, will start to get desperate. And they'll pick up any role and they'll work any role, no matter how qualified that role is or how much control you have, because you'll be able to say from a stat and a KPI point of view, I've got a new role on. And what you'll find is you'll hide behind that role when really, if you're really honest and you haven't got what you need from the client and you haven't delivered your plan properly, we should be thinking about walking away from that client and walking away from that role to find a better role. So we need to be honest, but not aggressive with our clients. We need to be confident and professional about what we're doing. So if we are confident and professional and we know exactly what they're looking for and we can find that, then we can commit to go away and finding that. But we need to be honest with the client if we're going to walk away from a client and tell them why we're not going to work with that client. I worked with a consultant many years ago in Nottingham. Very interesting consultant. He was working in the PC support market and was very adamant that if he couldn't get a bus to the client, then he didn't want to work with the client. So he only worked a very small geographical area. And if they weren't working certain technology, then he wouldn't work with the client. But he was very open and very honest with the clients. And so if a client didn't want to work in his method of working, then he would walk away and say, I'm not working with you, Mr. Client, because you're not working my way. I know my way works. I'm making X amount of placements every year. And therefore, that is what I am going to do. So I'm going to work on clients that commit with me rather than clients that don't commit with me. I'll ring you in 2 or 3 weeks' time. If you haven't filled the role, then we can have another conversation. So he was never aggressive. He was always polite. He was always professional, and he was always honest. On average, at that stage in computer people, it was a computer market. We were filling, on average, the consultant was making 2 placements a month. He was making, on average, 5 placements a month, purely because everybody he worked with worked in his method. He had massive commitment, he had massive understanding, and he had total control of the recruitment process. And if he didn't have control, he would walk away constantly without a fear of anything else. But he did it really professionally, constantly. So you've got to state facts to the client from your point of view, why you're working with them, but also why you're doing certain things. But you've also got to state facts from the point of view of why you're going to walk away and the problems it will cause. And if you're honest with the client and really open up to the client, and this is the difference between that recruiter that is just a transactional recruiter that just wants a job to fill a KPI point of view so you can get a number of CVs out and if by luck they fill the job. Where if we're more consultative and we're working with the client in a more nurturing way, and we're very open and honest with the client, and we're stating facts on what we think are right and what we think are wrong from our experience, then the client will start to understand that. Because I think the clients will change as we come out of COVID-19, because they see the pressure that work puts on people. They see there's different ways to do things. So if we become truly consultative with our client, we may be able to drive our prices up. We may be able to charge more money, but certainly we'll be able to gain far more control over the process than ever before. So we've got to make sure that we're doing all the right things. So use your notes and your job specs and review the job and why things are they are now and what they could be in the future. So I always think now, if I'm looking at my clients now and I was going to start to work with a new client or a job for a client that I've worked in the past, I'd go back over what's happened in the past with that client. What's happened with the recruitment process? What were the good points of the recruitment process? What were the blockers in the recruitment process? Because if I now know and I'm using my notes from the past, I'm using the job specification, I can now come to things and suggest things that will maybe improve their recruitment process. So again, becoming more consultative, I can see why they've stopped. But if I can use quantitative data to do that and show them, then all of a sudden I can give them genuine reason why they should change their recruitment process for the better, which again gives me more control. I've got to start thinking that if it's your fault, admit it. So if you put something into with a client and something goes wrong, admit it, apologize, and propose a remedy straight away. We need to have a number of solutions ready, prepared all the time. And remember, remind the client that the process you agreed initially and why it's important to keep the communication flow going. Remember the precedents that you set right from day one and the recruitment process that you set in place. And if you've set targets for each party to hit and you're constantly hitting your target and they're missing theirs, then you need to remind them what they initially agreed. You need to make sure that our client is fully committed. So get the client to reconfirm his commitments in email is really important. The best way to do that is obviously a face-to-face meeting. But now we can do more video meetings. It's very interesting. I did a survey with a client on permanent roles, and it was permanent roles only. Okay. And it was permanent roles on clients that they had met when taking a job spec and clients that they had met or roles that they'd taken on over the phone. 80% of every role they took on where they'd met the client, they filled. That dropped to 40% when they took the job spec over the phone. So it gave a massive advantage if you're taking the job spec over the phone, face-to-face rather than over the phone. So we need to make sure that now we have video technology, that we're not just using the phone, we can use the video. Because once you start to see the video, as we talk about communication, and we all talk about, 55% of all communication is through verbal, non-verbal communication. So it's all body language, etc. So if we use and see the body language of our client when we're selling to them, and we can suddenly see them, they're not agreeing because facially they're telling you they're not agreeing, although their voice is telling you that, yes, we like that, but their face is saying something different, then all of a sudden you can start to change things, you can start to move things. So taking that face-to-face meeting now via video may increase your opportunity to make placements. And after each call, speak with your manager, speak with the consultants that you know, and take advice. Because once you've taken all of that information, you've gone through that job spec, or you're working things, etc., etc., go away and speak to someone and take advice. you now have an opportunity to decide whether you want to work that role or go back and get more information and more commitment, or simply walk away. And if we walk away, again, it has to be professional. But remember, walking away means you've got an opportunity to pick up a better role that you maybe have more chance of filling, rather than sat there hiding behind a role that you know you're never going to fill. And that's the negotiating control of your own self that is really important. So you will have to negotiate to remain in control. So when we start to look at candidates, when do we have to negotiate in candidates to remain in control? So you'll find candidates suddenly up their demands for more money, more holiday, more training, more notice, if when they go to a meeting with a client, it isn't what it seems. So we've got to start to think, if the negotiation and control that we've done with our client sets an expectation, if we're pushing that expectation back to our candidate, if the client again isn't delivering that back to our candidate, then again, we've got to start thinking what's going on. We've also got to start thinking now, especially on video interviews, that, and I say this and I'll confirm it later on exactly what I mean. Sometimes on interviews, your client doesn't turn up. And what I mean by that, doesn't turn up, not physically, doesn't turn up mentally prepared. So when we start our negotiation with our client, we should be building in an interview prep time with our client as well as with our candidate. Because if our client doesn't turn up mentally for that interview, especially over video, it will show. And if candidates certainly want that job, they'll want more from our client. So they will put more demands on. They'll put more demands in. I also think at this time, certainly in the marketplace coming out of COVID-19, there's going to be more demand on clients to maintain their staff. Therefore, there'll be more counter offers. There will be more buybacks, but candidates will have more opportunity as clients come out to go for better jobs. So it's going to be a very, very competitive marketplace. So you've got to make sure you control your candidate all the way through that marketplace. And that's all about controlling the recruitment process. So again, if we're talking to a candidate and we know we have block interview dates set in the diary, we need to be telling the candidates, are they available for those dates? Because commitment is really important. Thinking now, before where you had to get a candidate to physically go see a client for that interview, we can now do that over video. So that means there's more time in the day to actually spend doing those videos, because clients will a lot more time. They'll do it after 5 o'clock, after 6 o'clock, after 7 o'clock. They might do it before 8 o'clock in the morning, because clients and candidates are working strange hours. So now we've got an opportunity to really start to make sure that our recruitment process is held tight. We've got to agree feedback times. So again, when we're talking about doing video interviewing, we could actually be on the video interview, and to control that even more by introducing the client and the candidate together on the video, because you're on that video, you're the person facilitating that. Pass the interview over to them, and then towards the end of the interview, come back onto the interview and close the candidate off so that candidate can disappear, but then instant feedback from the client. So we don't have to book feedback time now with the client. We can use the interview process as part of that feedback time, which means that you're controlling the process even more. You've got to sort of book interview dates, as we said, and feedback times, but this is all important. If you haven't got your terms and conditions agreed, then it means nothing, because our client can walk away at any point. Our client can renegotiate. Our client can take a candidate from anywhere else if you haven't got your terms and conditions in. So it'd be really important now to sort out your terms and conditions. So look at the clients that you're working with now, go through your data and find out which ones you haven't got terms from. The ones that you haven't got terms from, you've now got another opportunity to go back and speak to the client, talk about your new recruitment process, and just mention to them, by the way, I know we've been working with you in the past, but we haven't got any terms signed. Do you mind if I send my terms over and re-sign the terms? It's also an opportunity to maybe increase your rates and your fees with your clients. So we've got to make sure that we have our terms back. To do that, we need to make sure that we're training ourselves and training our candidates through that recruitment process. We've got to think now, in the old ways, we would only go in and train our candidates on the recruitment process. And the recruitment process is very, very simple. If they're doing video, we need to understand that they can work the video technology, better than I've been working it today, obviously, work the video technology, but also it would be worth looking at, have they got a background? I put a background on my system here. So if anyone walks behind me, my background covers them. I want to make sure that my sound is really good. So I use a headset to stop sound coming in from elsewhere. So especially if they're working from home, you've got kids, you've got road noise outside, etc., etc. Okay, so all these things are really important. I have a shirt on for this meeting because I think it's more of a casual meeting than actual full-blown meeting. If I was coming to meet you face to face, I would have a jacket on, potentially a tie on. If you're going for a full interview, you should have a jacket on, a tie on, etc. The same should apply if you're doing that on a video. And the same should apply to your client. How your client pushes themselves across video, again, is equally important. So if your client has a natural dress down policy, then still, I would inform the candidate, you need to be suited and booted, but the client is more than likely going to be in a t-shirt because they have a dress down policy. So we need to start to train the candidates and train ourselves on that process. Because if we're going to get involved in that recruitment process, then we also need to make sure that we are dressed accordingly for that process. Our background is set appropriate for that process. We need to make sure that we understand the technology for that process and drive forward. So, negotiation. What is the difference really between negotiation and selling? And I think this is the bit that we need to really get to understand fully. There is a big difference between selling and negotiating. You should always be closing when speaking with a client. You need to identify what your client is seeking so you can match it against your recruitment process. So, the difference between the selling and negotiation. The fundamental difference between selling and negotiation is that selling is a process to identify the fit between what the seller is offering and what the buyer is seeking. Where negotiation is the process of agreeing the terms of the deal and is part of the selling continuum. Yet negotiation should only begin when there is a genuine commitment from the buyer and the seller towards a conditional sale. So if we start to break our sell down into two different parts, the fundamental is you're selling your service to your client and you're identifying your fit for your service to your client. The negotiation comes when you start to agree terms with your client, and that's really important. What most agencies are really good at is that first part, selling their services. What they're not good at is negotiating terms and conditions and negotiating fees. So we've got to make sure when we negotiate our fee, there is genuine commitment from the client. If there's genuine commitment from the client, we can start to pitch our fees a little bit higher and maybe end up with a higher end point than we are at the moment. Because at the moment, we're going in and we're selling, but when it comes to negotiation, we're capitulating because we're not really committed ourselves and we haven't got the client committed enough by negotiating with the client and gaining full commitment all the way through the process. That process is all about the client seeing value in your service and what's going on in your service. So negotiation is very simple. Negotiation, we've got to look out for the following when we start to negotiate. We've got to have a plan and know what you have to play with. And what I mean by that is you have to have a plan of what you're going to offer the client and know what you're negotiating with. So know where your starting point is, but know when your end point or your walkaway point is. So you know where your plan is. Don't give everything away at once in one go. So I've talked before on early training webinars about breaking our sale down into compartmentalized chunks. So you've got continuity, then you've got exclusive, then you've got retained, then you've got recruitment services type scenario. So you're selling all 4 different services. And if you're selling the top service at 25%, If our client suddenly says, I can't afford that, I can only afford 15, and you drop yourself down to 15% instantly, then you've given all your trade away. What I'd be saying is, okay, I can't go to 15%. What part of my recruitment service do you not want? So I'm now starting to pull things out, and I can start to drive desire and commitment back up from the client, because you go, oh, I really need that. I really need that. Well, I can't do that at that price. I can do it at this price. So you can start to push from both sides. But if you give everything away at once, and what generally happens in recruitment, what I see from certain junior recruiters, is when they negotiate with the client and start that selling process with the client, their negotiation is, this is my service, it's A, B, C, D, E, and I charge this price for it. Rather than going, this is my service, what service fits you best? The client agrees which service fits him best, and then you give the price, is a very different negotiation, because the client's mentally committed to the service that he wants. You now just have to agree the fee that he's going to pay for that service. Therefore, trading variables is really important. You've got to ask questions to assess the client's feeling. So before you give a fee, you've got to understand that if you have a process that the client really likes, he's got to really commit to that process, that he likes that process, because by doing that, you're setting the client's expectations, and setting client expectations early is really good when negotiating, because if that's what they expect to receive, then when you give a fee for that, then you can start to take things away, which then readdresses their expectations, which means you can take things away slowly and keep your price reasonably high, rather than taking everything in all at once and you're dropping your pants and end up at a sub 15%. So if you know your product and your pricing, you must be able to justify everything. And market intelligence is really key for this, because you're going to have lots of competition out there selling the same product and the same service. So if you can justify that and then bring market intelligence into it with what's going on, you can start to separate yourself from the rest of the recruitment market. So are you looking at alternative to, also are you looking for alternatives to actually trade or to increase? So you may be looking for a client who might not be able to afford the salary banding that you think is right in the marketplace, or the rate that's right in the marketplace. What can the client offer, or what can the client trade that would maybe keep that price, keep your value high, but maybe bring candidates to you? That could be training. That could be, what they have in the benefits package, health, pension package, etc. Because all these things now people are going to start thinking about. And if you start to think about what people have been writing about COVID-19, where money and buying designer clothes are right at the bottom of those things, family, personal health, work-life balance are now right at the top of those things. So if you've got a client that can offer a far better work-life balance type package, you may be able to trade alternatives from salary for that, which gives your client a better understanding of the person. So again, it's going back to under promise, but not too much. So therefore, you can over deliver. And remember, at the end of the negotiation, clarity is key. Clarity is absolutely key. If you have clarified everything, then the client understands that, and you're absolutely there all the time. So as we move on, the preparation is really key. So prepare before we get onto the call. We need to plan the call with what's going on. So we need to prepare to negotiate and create a plan. And the plan must be very, very simple. We need to make sure we know the boundaries that we're offering, know the features, benefits, and advantages of your services, and sell them in that way. We've got to know the features and make sure we do that. We've got to know what is a win-win solution looks like for you and your candidate and yourself and the client. You need to understand what motives your client and your candidate need to create a win-win situation. And you need to know what will make your client and candidate be happy. If we put our candidate and client first in this scenario, always, then you'll find that money will flow. If you put yourself first and money first, you'll find you have a blocker to making money. The best recruiters I've ever met, and I'm talking 7-figure recruiters, over £1 million recruiters, they have always put the candidate and the client first. Money to them is a byproduct. So We need to know what you can give away that's inexpensive to you, but expensive to the client. Now, you spend all day in the marketplace speaking to candidates and clients, gathering market information. To the client, that's really expensive. That's really good information. To you, it's really inexpensive. There's other things that you can trade that are inexpensive to you, but expensive to the client. So you need to prepare for objections and have a solution ready. So understand, feel, felt, found. I understand how you feel, Mr. Client. I have other clients that felt exactly the same, but what I found when we did this process, this is what happened. And remember, you're the expert. So use your knowledge to your advantage. You know what's going on in the marketplace, and that becomes a high price commodity if you use it properly and use it wisely. So in preparation, we have to make sure that we have the following to prepare: the 5 P's. Proper planning prevents poor performance. A very old adage, and there's usually another P in there if you really want to add another P in there from there, but it brings confidence to aim high and not crumble. So if you pitch high, if you plan properly, you can pitch high and don't crumble. If you pitch high and you sound professional, there's more opportunity to get that across the line. If you're sounding professional and you're very confident in your marketplace, then it instills confidence in your client. That enables you to stand your ground. If you have a walk away point and you truly want to walk away and you tell the client you're walking away, then all of a sudden the client has a far different respect for you, because you're not just that transactional recruiter. Give me the job, I'll start at 25%, I'll finish at 15%, fine, I'll take that job. You've walked away. You could influence your ability to ask what you want rather than what you need, or walk away. If you've prepared properly, you can influence that. And if you walk away, it influences it even more. And you'll be surprised how many clients will come back to you because you've walked away. So be confident to target a high price. And it's professional to settle your negotiation with the client before you work the role. If you settle your negotiation with the client before you work the role, then everyone knows where they stand. But I've seen so many consultants working roles where they haven't settled all the negotiation. They haven't set the interview dates. They haven't set the feedback time. They haven't set the offer process. They haven't set the fee. They haven't set the terms and conditions. They haven't got them signed, and the list goes on. So we've got to really make sure that we do all of those things. So very quickly, finishing off, we have to create extra commitment. We have to make sure that we are working in the right way. So you need to match your offering to your client's needs. So if you've got a really good understanding of what your client needs and you can match your offering to their needs, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to negotiate with your client. Your aim is to help get what they want. And by helping get what they want, you'll get what you want. If you go away and think me, 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 then you will lose, because the recruiter that comes in and understands how to get what the client wants, they will win constantly because they have a far better understanding of your client. So you need to tailor your offering and make it unique to them, because then that starts to differentiate. Everyone's suddenly talking about the digital age of video and Zoom and etc. We were on a webinar yesterday and a client said, I have been using Interview for the last 3 years. It was a game changer for me and my business, but now everyone was going to be using Interview, Odro, Microsoft Teams, etc. for video. So their differentiator has started to disappear. But because they had first mover advantage, their differentiator is now that the fact that they have honed that skill and they know exactly how to build it and deliver it, and they are taking that skill to an extra level. So value goes both ways. The client needs to understand the benefit of working with you, as well as you need to understand the benefit of working with the client. If the client's not providing you benefit, then you should walk away, because you can rest assured if you're not providing the client benefit, they will walk away. So you've got to give live examples of where you've added value to others and then link it back to your client. So as we're talking, and I've talked about other clients that I've helped and worked with and done this and done that, I'm linking that back constantly to how it can help you guys deliver and control and negotiate with your clients. So by giving live recruitment examples to your client, again, it adds value to you, and it means that you can link it back. And that means trial closing is really important all the time. If you can offer alternatives, you need to offer them one at a time. And then, as we said, ask for the business. Once you ask for the business, you need to be quiet. You need to listen for the silence of the client. Otherwise, if you speak, the client will gather that you are not confident in your sale, and they will try to drive your price down. So it becomes a bit of a game at the end of negotiation, that you have to negotiate hard, give your price, and then listen to what the client has to say. Because sometimes the client's just thinking about what they want. And by thinking about what they want, they may be concluding in their head that actually this is a really good deal. And you might be panicking, thinking, I'm not too sure whether he's going to go for this. I'm going to drop from 25 to suddenly 20. And all of a sudden you've lost an opportunity. So give your price, hang tough, and let the client come back to you. Then if you have to negotiate, then we go back down this list. Offer alternatives all at once. Make sure we've trial close. Make sure you're giving value. Make sure you're selling your features and benefits properly to them so they can understand the value. If they're coming back and asking to renegotiate, it is because they do not understand the value of your service, or they don't believe the value in your service, which means you've got to address your sale for the next time you go on and do that type of sale. So it's all about understanding what you can sell and what you can't sell. So to conclude, so I've just gone over the hour. To conclude, we've got to make sure that we are doing the right things. We've got to control and create an equal partnership. We need to recognize when control is lost, and we need to gain control right from the start. We must understand that by gaining control, it increases your chance of making a placement, whether you're in the contract market, the perm market, the temp market. The more you control, the more you understand, the more chance you have of making a placement. You now understand the importance of asking the right questions when taking a job specification in order to remain in control. And if you use a job specification sheet, then brilliant. If you're not using a job specification sheet, what I suggest is you go away and you create the perfect job specification sheet. By creating the perfect job specification sheet and then using it, you will always ensure you take the perfect job spec. If you fill that form out and there's white space everywhere, it shows you haven't asked the question. Even if the client sends you a job spec, I used to take a job spec, I then used to fill out my job spec form and look for where the blanks are. Where the blanks were, I then knew what my plan was when I went back to my client to talk about what more information I needed from my client. We need to understand things will not go to plan unless you control the situation all the time. So you need to understand when things do go wrong, look in the mirror, because it's usually that your fault that it has gone wrong. You've suddenly done something that hasn't gained control all the way through. You've been a little bit desperate. You've been a little bit urgent to get a job on. You've not followed the full process. And again, when we talk about those that excel at recruitment, those that are brilliant and those that are just average, the difference is their control of the recruitment process. The difference is they know the basics absolutely inside and out, and they use the basics constantly all the time. They do not cut corners. And all these courses are all basic recruitment skills. These are all basic skills that we should all have been taught on day one of recruitment, but we may have forgotten. We may have tailored it into a different side of way and started to forget to do different things. We have an opportunity now to go back skill ourselves and really understand what the basics truly are. And if we can deliver those core basics and then add professionalism to them, then all of a sudden we'll start to make more placements. We've got to understand that once control is lost, we must regain control again. We need to understand the difference between selling and negotiation. Because remember, the selling is all about your service. Negotiation is about the fee and the legal terms. And if we can get the fee and the legal terms right, then everything else is a ballpark. We've got to make sure that those parts are separated properly and we do not blur them. Recruitment has a habit of blurring selling and negotiation in the same thing when we come to closing. And by doing that, you're missing an opportunity to pitch high and maintain a high fee, because we're blurring negotiation and selling into one. We need to plan. We need to plan and prepare to negotiate. If we don't plan and prepare to negotiate, we've no idea what we're going on that call to actually make. And last but not least, we need to know our features, advantages, and benefits. So that's it, ladies and gents. Sorry I went 10 minutes over, and sorry for the small technical hitch. There's one or two people have left already. Sorry about that. They've left because they've had to go on to other meetings. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to field some questions from there. So if you want to put some questions, is there somewhere I can view previous webinars that you've done? Francesca, absolutely. If you go onto our website, which is www.loveworklifeconsultancy.com, and if you go into the management chat rooms, you'll find all the webinars on there. And what I'll do, Francis, I will probably, let me just take a note of your name. I will drop an email down to you as well with everything from there. Pilkington, okay. Website, okay. I'll drop an email down to you, Francesca, so you can see them all from there, okay. Anyone else got any more questions? Is control another word for business influence? Yes, Helen, it is. It's about influencing your client, but it's also about influencing yourself. I always think, you know, consultants spend too much time trying to control the uncontrollable. And by controlling the uncontrollable, what you're doing is you're letting the client control. But the biggest person that is uncontrollable is yourself. How many times do we believe we take a job spec and then we think, I can definitely feel that, I can definitely feel that. But deep inside, something's telling you, yeah, it's gonna be really hard to feel that. You should sometimes listen to that little gut feeling and then go back and find out why it's hard to fill. And if you understand why it's hard to fill, then you can start to do something about it. So influencing is really important, and negotiation and that difference between selling and negotiating is where it comes. As we start to think about selling is influencing the negotiation right at the end. And if we can negotiate properly, then we're in the right ballpark. But if we sell all our processes all at once and then just give a fee at the end, there is no negotiation. You've given your fee. Now the client's in control of your negotiation. But if I said, this is my contingency service, this is my specialist service, this is this service, this is this service, which service is that you like, which service do you think will fill this role, and they give you the service that you want, you've now influenced their recruitment process, which then when you come to negotiate, you can now start to negotiate the price on that service alone. So yes, it is very much in that way. Any other questions? No, I think that's time. Francesca, thanks for your email address, amicusjobs@.co.uk. Absolutely, I'll get that done to you. Guys, thank you very much for your time. It's been very much appreciated. Same time, same place next week. If you want to book on, I'm not sure what the topic is next week. Okay, so if you want a topic, fire that down to me. Okay, I wish you all the health and wealth and happiness. And if you've got any other questions, drop them in now, and I'll be closing the webinar in about 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much. Have a super day. Have a super weekend.